live now.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to Schools Forum. Obviously, most of you have had a very busy Christmas and start of the school year. So without further ado, I'm David Jones and I'm chairing the meeting today in David Japes' absence. Members of the public are invited to view this meeting online and the meeting is recorded. We are meeting virtually in response to the limitations placed on governance by the COVID-19 pandemic. The City Solicitor has advised that, pursuant to Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, this meeting will be run by reference to the model standing orders as set out in the Local Authorities Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority Meetings Regulations 2020, number 392. Forum members are requested to keep their microphones on mute and to only turn these on when they are called to speak. If you have any questions or comments to make on the reports, please use the chat function and simply state RTS, request to speak. Okay, please can I ask everyone taking part today to confirm that they are present. So if I just go through the attendance checklist, and we can just give us a yay, please. So Jackie Collins.
Yay.
Okay, myself, Cher Dole.
Yay.
Jason Crouch.
Present, Chair.
Joe Cooper. Okay, no Joe. Sean Preston.
Yep, I'm here.
Nathan Waits. No. Liz Hardingham.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Sharon Burt.
Present.
Councillor Susie Horton. No. Councillor Claire Udy.
Hello. Hi.
Councillor Judith Smythe.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Lynn Stagg. No. Councillor Terry Horton.
Yeah, present, Chair.
Simon Barrable.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Cara Jewell.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
And then the officers, so Alison Edgerton.
Yes, I'm here.
Angela Mann.
I'm here, and also just to say that Councillor Stagg contacted me earlier to say she was having IT problems and so probably wouldn't be able to join.
Okay, thank you. Alison Jeffrey.
Present.
Mike Stoneman.
Yeah, I'm here.
Julia Catherine.
Yes, I'm here.
And Lisa Gallagher.
Present, Chair.
Okay. Is there anyone else on the line who we haven't mentioned? No, marvellous. Thank you very much. Okay, on to the agenda then. Apologies for absence. Alison, we've got David Japes, and we've just heard about Lynn Stagg struggling with IT. Anybody else?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. I believe we have none outstanding, but this is the opportunity for anyone to declare an interest.
It's Councillor Claire Udy here. Sorry, it's only because I have two school. It's nothing, but I have two school children which are in LEA schools.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, Chair. Councillor Terry Norton here. I also have a daughter that's in a Portsmouth LEA school, and I'm employed at Mayfield School, albeit through an external agency.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, although I'm a parent governor, obviously then that capacity I do have two children at Mayfield.
Okay, thank you very much. And if we're all doing that, then I have children at Priory and Portsmouth College as well. So we're all there. Okay. Thank you. Membership changes. I don't believe there are any changes for this meeting, but Alison, I believe we have some vacancies.
Yes, we do, Chair. I've got 3 secondary academy representative vacancies and 2 primary academy representative vacancies. I wanted to highlight to Schools Forum that Schools Forum is required to consist of 2/3 of school members. With these vacancies, we are right on the edge of having 2/3 school members compared to other members. And can I encourage those academies of School Forum to talk to their academy colleagues and encourage them to join, so that we've got a fair representative across the city of schools on the forum. As I said, previously stated, academy representatives do not need to be head teachers. They can have another role within the Academy Trust. And hopefully we'll get some membership before the next meeting.
Yeah, so obviously a bit of arm twisting needed to get that going from people. Item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. We need to ensure that this is a correct record of the meeting held on the 2nd of December. Are members happy with this as a correct record? Okay, by silence then, I believe, do we need to, Alison, we need a proposer and seconder for these, is that correct?
That's right, yes.
So can we have a proposer to say the minutes are correct?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you. And a seconder?
I just put it in the chat. I'm happy to second that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sean and Jason. Okay, matters arising. Alison, are there any matters arising from the last minutes?
Yes, we have 2 matters arising. One with relation to the early years report. We're proposing to bring a report back in May, and I will liaise with the early years team to bring that to the forum in May. The second matter arising relates to a working group with regards to the school funding arrangements, and for a paper to be brought back in February. We've discussed the potential of a working group over the course of the last few weeks. And with regards to the schools block, we have a hard national funding formula that's due to come in place within the hopefully next year. And the Schools Forum have actually had agreement to follow the NFF, and we've done that for the last 2 years. Therefore, with regards to the school funding formula for mainstream schools, there's very few things that can be changed. This is the area cost adjustment, the minimum funding guarantee, and the lump sum. We propose that under the fact that there's very few elements to change, that actually we don't set up a working group at this stage for the mainstream formula. However, we do know that the DfE is proposing to introduce a hard national funding formula potentially in 2022-23, and that consultation will be taking place at some stage over the coming year. Once we know what the consultation timetable is, what we would propose is to actually bring together a small working group of schools to feed into that consultation to add more breadth and depth to the authority's response. And I say that would then give us a much stronger feedback on the national proposals.
Okay, Sharon, I've just noticed you've got a comment. Is that about this point?
Not about the point that Alison just made, no. I
Okay,
thought that before she started talking.
Sorry, my timing on this is going to be abysmal. If we just talk about Alison's point there, any objections to that? Okay, that's fine. And then, sorry, Cher, back to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise a point. I'm not really sure if I should do it under the minutes or not, but it does relate to point 7 7.2 in the minutes, which was to do with the early years provider COVID additional grant. I just wanted to flag really that now that our situation has got, if it were possible, even worse than it was in the autumn, I think there is again pressure, particularly on nurseries that rely on income as well as funding formulas, to rethink whether there's any additional support possible.
Alison, do you want to take that one?
Yes, we are proposing to bring a report in February. We said at the last meeting that we would look at our funding situation towards the end of the next term with regards to if there was an underspend that we could then pass that on to nursery settings. We're proposing to bring a report in February to the February Schools Forum that sets out what we would propose to do. The issue we have is we won't have a good idea as to where our underspend will be until late February. So we will bring some proposals forward according to what we think the underspend might be and a range of options that Schools Forum can then vote on.
Thanks.
Okay, Cara, you wanted to speak as well?
Sorry, just picking up on Cher's point, I just think it's worth knowing that that grant hasn't actually been paid out to providers as yet either. So that's still awaiting.
Cara, I've just received confirmation this afternoon from the early years team that they've actually processed the payments on the system, so they should be coming through to providers in the next couple of days once they've gone through our financial system.
Okay, thank you, Alison. I just thought it's worth noting that obviously in between the meeting that hasn't appeared yet. So
yeah, that's fair enough.
Okay, so I'm all happy to move on from the minutes unless there are any further questions. No. Okay. So the next item 5, is the Wimborne primary amalgamation balances. Alison?
Yes, sorry, this is me. It's okay.
Don't apologise.
No, it's okay. Okay, so regarding the Wimborne infant and junior school balances, the school and early years finance regulations require an authority to close the accounts of the infant and junior schools and put the resulting balances back into the dedicated schools grant. Following that, we then are able to pay the balance to the new primary school. The report sets out the impact of the transfer of balances on the school's contingency fund for 2021 and proposes that the balance of the 141,800 is restored in 21-22. Only maintained school members can vote on this item, and we ask them to endorse the payment of the closing balances of the Wimborne infant and junior schools and the reinstatement of the school-specific contingency in 21-22. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, it doesn't seem like there are any questions. It's a fairly straightforward matter of the schools keeping their balances, really. It's just going in and out as far as I see it. In that case, this vote is just for the maintained school members, and there are many of us, that we endorse the transfer of the Wimborne Infant and Wimborne Junior Schools closing balances to Wimborne Primary School from the school-specific contingency, and endorse the use of the 2021 carry forward in 2021-22 to reinstate the school-specific contingency to the balance of 141,800 as at December 20. Now, from the maintained schools, can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Chair. And a seconder. Thank you, Jason. And so recommendations have been proposed and seconded. I'll now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted within the regulations. There is no dissent. The proposal is passed. Are there any objectors to these recommendations, which are for the maintained school members only? Okay, thank you. So those recommendations have been approved.
Thank you.
On to item 6, which is the Inclusion Centre EHCP banding for 21-22. Julia, are you happy to lead on this one?
I am, yes, happy
Thank
to do
you.
that. So in Portsmouth, we have 9 mainstream schools with an inclusion centre, as set out in the report. And what we're seeking is the schools forum to endorse the funding arrangements set out in the report. So you'll remember that we have previously talked about moving to a banded funding arrangement for children with EHCPs in mainstream schools, which is in line with our banded funding arrangement for special schools in the city. And this paper is specifically talking about children with an EHCP in an inclusion centre, adopting that similar banded funding model. So the paper sets out which schools currently have an inclusion centre in 3.4, table 1. And it also, on the right-hand column, sets out the current element 3 top-up funding, which is applicable to each of those inclusion centres. So the current arrangement is that the funding allocated is to any child placed in that inclusion centre, regardless of the child's specific needs. Do you want me to pause for request to speak now, or do you want me to wait till the end, Chair?
Well, should we have those questions pertinent now, Sharon?
Yeah, I just noticed there's that significant variance there for Milton Park losing almost 80k, and I just wondered if you could talk around that a bit more, please, Julia.
Okay, sorry. Yes, I haven't been through the whole report yet, so shall I keep going and then take questions at the end?
Yeah, I think that'll be easier if you finish your report first. Yeah.
Apologies, I wasn't sure if it was something that needed picking up before I did that. So that initial table sets out the current funding arrangements for each school. And as I say, every child placed in that inclusion centre currently receives the same level of funding. However, section 4.1 sets out the reasons why we want to change that model. So there is currently an inequity between the different inclusion centres. The funding is based on how those particular centres were funded previously, and you could have children with different levels of complexity of need, the school would then receive the same level of funding. Equally, you could have 2 children with very similar needs, and if they moved from one inclusion centre to another inclusion centre, then the amount of funding attached would be different. So what we'd like to do, in line with the way that we fund EHCPs in mainstream school and the way that we fund children with EHCPs in special schools, is to move to a model where the level of funding is agreed as part of the statutory EHC needs assessment process, and is dependent on the complexity of the child's needs. So children with more complex needs who need a higher level of provision would receive a higher level of funding to reflect that. That allocation of the band of funding would be based on some banding criteria, which would describe in detail the types of need that would fall into each band of funding and the level of provision that would be expected to be delivered from that band of funding. In the same way that works for mainstream schools, that will work for mainstream schools and currently works for special schools, of course, a child can change their band of funding if necessary. So it's a needs-led model. If there is evidence that a child's needs have changed, then of course the band of funding can change to reflect that. And that would happen, as it does currently, through the annual review process. Table 2, just at the end of section 4.4, sets out the proposed element 3 top-up funding that we are looking at. So you would have some children, as now, who don't require any additional funding to meet their needs, perhaps if they're in mainstream lessons for all of the time, and some of our children with sensory impairment currently are in mainstream lessons for all of their time, so might fall into that category. You've got some children who might fit into the core funding band, and then you've got enhanced, which is a slightly higher level of funding, exceptional, and then potentially highly exceptional. So that's the element 3 top-up funding in addition to the other funding that the school receives to meet those needs. Those funding levels are indicative at the moment, and so will be confirmed, but we wouldn't go below those levels, and that's the same basis on which we agreed the mainstream funding bands previously. We've done some modelling set out in table 3, as Sharon Burt picked up, on the potential impact. Now, this is potential impact, so this is not based on the actual assessment of children's needs currently. This is just looking at, well, if we assumed that we had a percentage of children in each inclusion centre on each of those funding bands, what that might look like. And that highlights that with those percentages we've used, so 70% on core, 15% on enhanced, 10% on exceptional, and 5% highly exceptional, then the sort of variance that you would see would be as set out in the right-hand column. Now, Milton Park Primary do have an inclusion centre with 14 places currently, and they would be, under this particular modelling, they would be the school that would lose out. We have been in discussion with all of the schools within inclusion centres over the last couple of years about developing this model, and obviously the thing to point out here is that this is just based on this is a modelling in terms of what it might look like, because obviously once this is agreed, we'll need to look at the individual children's needs. If, for example, you had more children with a higher complexity of need, then that decrease in funding would be much reduced from there. So we have engaged, we've worked with our colleagues in schools with an inclusion centre to develop the model. We got that group together again in December to revisit that and confirm that that was the direction of travel. And then you'll see in table 4, we've just answered some specific questions about how that will work. So annual review meetings will always consider every year whether the child remains on the correct band of funding, and that requests to change the band of funding can be considered as part of that annual review process. We will confirm the commissioned places in January of each year for the following September, so that schools can adjust their staffing accordingly, so they have sufficient notice of that. And in terms of the actual children who are currently placed and who we're looking to place from September, the SEN team will be able to advise individual schools on which band current and proposed children are likely to receive funding on.
Thank you, Julia. Sharon, did you want to come back to your question at all?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just concerned really about the impact that might have for Milton Park in terms of the kind of provision, because that's quite a significant amount to be losing. I do appreciate what you have said about looking at individual pupils and their specific, you know, what they have in terms of revenue and their needs being met. But that seems like quite a significant impact for them.
Yeah, I think probably what I'd say is that so that impact is based on the assumption that 70% of pupils would be on that core band, so to look at the actual impact, we'd need to look at the complexity of needs of children, and I believe a number of the children currently at Milton Park would potentially be on meet the criteria for a higher band of funding. So I think probably to get an exact measure of the impact, we'd need to look at the needs of the actual children placed there.
Cara?
Thank you. I think most of my question has been answered, because I was going to ask about impacts and obviously how this would align with annual reviews and whether the funding would be dealt with in time for the school to prepare. So,
okay.
Yeah, so for the following September, we would let schools know about the number of places to be commissioned in the January. The SEN team have to confirm placements by the 15th of February. That's a national deadline for the following September for place transfers, and certainly would be discussing with schools through specialist panels in the spring term any placements for the following September. So we would aim to give schools as much notice as we possibly can, obviously subject to parental preference and children perhaps moving into the city. But where we can, we'd look to give schools as much notice as possible about placements.
Thank you, Julia.
Judith?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I was also onto the same as business of the Milton Park Primary. If you divide 122,500 by the highest possible rate, which is 8,000, highly exceptional, you still got money left over. There must be something wrong, and I wanted to know what was exceptional about their children in that school, because it's massively out of line with everything else.
Yeah, so it is out of line. You're absolutely right, and that's one of the reasons why we're looking to change the model. So if I just refer to table 1, which sets out the current funding arrangement. So obviously Milton Park is currently funded at the highest top-up value, but the admission criteria for that inclusion centre are now the same as for a number of the other inclusion centres, for example, at Devonshire, at Portsmouth, where obviously the additional funding is less. In addition to that, children move on from Milton Park School when they reach secondary age to Trafalgar School, where again the current funding rate is very different. So this is one of the reasons why we want to introduce a model that is reflective of the child's needs rather than a level of funding that is unique to each individual school, because currently we've got a situation that a child could move from Milton Park up to Trafalgar in year 7, but then the funding to Trafalgar School is much less than the funding that would currently be given to Milton Park. So what we want is a needs-led model. We want the funding to reflect the child's needs rather than sort of historic funding arrangements for that particular setting.
I mean, obviously, Chair, one wouldn't want to see, you know, a real dislocation in the service provided there, but you could have 15 children at 8,000 a year in that, out of that figure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's been hanging on for quite a while, this inequity, really. So it does seem to me to be a good outcome and, you know, well consulted about. Okay, are there any more questions? Jason, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Julia, what impact are you seeing social emotional needs to the impact of lockdown? Are you seeing anything starting to come through from psychological assessments in terms of uplift?
In terms of increased complexity, I mean, I think the real challenge will be around school attendance once all schools are open again for all children. So yes, inevitably we are seeing huge pressure on our colleagues in CAMS in terms of mental health needs, and I think for some children making that transition back to school where they've had a long period of time out of school, particularly children with additional needs, is going to be hard. And also children with additional needs may well find it more difficult to engage with remote learning. So we're working really closely with school colleagues to try and minimise that impact as much as possible. I think it will be seen later, you know, further ahead rather than right now.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any more questions? In that case, we'll move forward then. So it's recommended that Schools Forum endorse the funding arrangements for mainstream schools with an inclusion centre as set out in the report. So this is for all of Schools Forum. Do I have a proposer for approval? Thank you, Chair and Sean. And a seconder, I'm presuming if Sean, you'll second that. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, the recommendation has been proposed and seconded. I'll now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted within the regulations. There is no dissent. The proposal is passed. Are there any objectors to this recommendation? No? Then thank you. That recommendation has been approved. Okay, over to item 7 now, school funding arrangements for 2021-22, and that's over to Angela for this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report follows the previous school forum reports which outlined the approach to setting school budgets. Both primary and secondary schools will be funded using the national funding formula for 21-22. The values published by the DfE have been increased in line with the Portsmouth area cost adjustment. The minimum per pupil funding levels have been used as shown in Table 3, and because of this, 10 schools received additional funding through this mechanism. In addition to that, a minimum funding guarantee has been applied of 2% compared to the 2021 funding. The national non-domestic rate values have been amended to reflect the latest changes. And finally, the lump sum minimum that we had in the guidance was 119,000, but due to additional one-off funding, this has been able to be increased to £132,998 for 21-22. The growth fund is detailed in 5.16 to 5.19, and it shows that there will be sufficient funding for the next 5 years. And the criteria does need to be approved by Schools Forum annually, and it's included in Appendix 3 for reference. In terms of the Central Schools block, this saw an increase of 3.8% per pupil, plus the teachers paying pension grants for centrally employed teachers. The increase in the budget is to pay for additional licensing costs, duties which were retained on behalf of schools, and also a small increase to support the delivery of Schools Forum. For early years, the details came to the last Schools Forum, but since then we've had notification of an increase of our funding per hour for both the 3 and 4 year olds and the 2-year-olds. It is proposed to increase the hourly rates by the same amounts as detailed in 7.2. And for the high needs budgets, they're still being worked on, but Schools Forum are asked to endorse the banded funding values for 21-22 for mainstream schools, inclusion centres, which are as per Julia's report, for alternative provision and special schools are set out in Appendix 4. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Angela. Cher, first of all.
Hi, yes, I just had, this might be showing my ignorance, but I was interested by the growth on the growth fund criteria, the formula for that. I understand there's quite a lot of criteria around how you calculate what's given, etc., etc. I was just interested in how often is the PAN formally reviewed? I have a vague memory that sometimes these additional funding becomes a kind of an historical thing, that maybe a school never gets to the point where their intake actually matches their PAN, and should there be something whereby it triggers a review? So if they've increased their PAN and are receiving growth funding, but they never actually get enough children, and maybe the situation changes in other schools nearby, so actually there are vacancies where, do you see what I mean, where it could spread out, then at what point would the growth funding stop being given, or the PAN be reviewed as to whether it's realistic that that's actually required anymore? Does that make sense?
Alison, are you able to reply?
Okay, I think Mike might be able to give a bit more information with regards to how often they review the PAN within the capital sufficiency team within the education department. From our perspective, where schools are having an increase in pupils due to an increase in PAN, we will pay the growth fund in that financial year that they see that increase. I believe that Mike would best probably to answer how often the PAN is reviewed. But most of the information that we're looking at are those schools that get an increase in PAN, where it's due to the basic need increase in the number of pupils within the city as well. So it's a combined approach.
Thank you, Alison. Mike, do you want to add anything there? Mike, are you there?
It's gone.
It's gone. Okay. In that case, Sharon.
Hi, thank you. Just concerned to see that there's no increase in the Element 3 top-up for special schools from April 21. Just wondered if you could explain that further, please, Angela.
I mean, we're still working through the budget, but in terms of the initial workings, there is no scope to increase the elements as we did last year.
Just, you know, in relation to 3.3 million additional, you know, in terms of SEN, you know, we have the knowledge of that, coupled with, you know, there's the increase there in the basic entitlement in mainstream, and concerned really that there's no consideration of the cost of living increase in respect of this.
Alison, did you want to respond?
Yeah, as Angela said, we are currently working through the high needs budgets. But
sorry, Alison, I think you've broken up there.
Sorry,
I've lost you.
Can everybody else, can people hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, you.
So just to confirm, we are currently working through the high needs budgets, and whilst we've had a considerable increase in funding, there's also a considerable increase in expenditure. There's a high number of new high needs places required for September 2021, and the cost of those high needs places, that's, you know, 400,000. The associated Element 3 top up is coming out about 1.6 million for those places. We've seen growth across the EHCP mainstream and outer city, and that's in the best part of 700,000. So there's a considerable amount of growth within the high needs budget that obviously this funding is going towards. We are still working on it, and we are looking to try and ensure that we come in within the high needs block, but under the current circumstances, I'm not able to offer a further top up on our current Element 3 top up bandings to cover a cost of inflation, just purely because of the increase in the number of places that we've got within the city.
Sharon, do you want to say any more on that?
I wouldn't be comfortable approving it, you know, in respect of this.
Alison, when do we come back to look at these figures next?
I could bring the banding rates back to the February meeting, so they could be within the total block of this. So we'll see the whole DSG and the banding rates within that. So I can bring those back to the meeting on the 10th of February. The DSG budget does need to be approved on the 10th of February by Schools Forum and then Cabinet member following, for us to ensure that we meet the statutory deadline of informing schools of their budgets by the 26th of February.
Okay, so should we add that to the minutes as an action for the next meeting then?
Yeah, I'll bring those banded rates next meeting.
Thank you. Sharon, did you want to add any more there?
No, I just said thank you. I just said thank you, sorry.
I didn't hear that. Okay, Sean?
Yeah, Jason, did you want to add anything to that before I move on to anything else first?
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting to hear Alison, you're saying that high needs block percentage might raise, but I'm hearing that, you know, pupil numbers longer term, medium longer term across Portsmouth are likely to fall. How often do we look at that in terms of the mix of funding? Is that something strategically you're doing sort of 3-5 years out? I'm just conscious maintained schools are getting sort of cautious heads up that numbers are likely to fall through admission.
Alison, it's probably worthwhile Mike talking about sort of the sufficiency planning that his team does. I think Mike's back now.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, I got kicked out, but yeah, I'm back again. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah. So on the forecasting, yes, we do regular updates on forecasting. That's not just in terms of mainstream school places, but also special school places. And in fact, we just completed a significant piece of work which Sharon was heavily involved in terms of what sort of space we're going to need going forward to meet the current demand, which is significant in terms of special school complex places. Having said that, you're right. In the sort of medium to longer term, school place numbers overall are going to come down, and we're starting to see that now in the primary sector, and obviously that will feed through eventually into the secondary sector. But we're some way off yet before we start to realise that. And in terms of pupils with the most complex needs, we have seen year-on-year increases, and those increases are still set to continue for the next few years at least, which is why we have a 5-year strategy in place to make sure we've got sufficient accommodation going forward over that period. So I don't think we can do too much at the moment, Jason, but just to reassure you, we monitor those forecasts on an annual basis. They're as accurate as they can be based on a whole range of assumptions, but it's also based on learners that are in the system that we know about. And at some point, I hope it will level off, and at some point we might even see it start to drop, but we're not there yet, far from it.
Thanks, Mike. It's useful to know.
Thank you, Mike. Back to you then, Sean.
Yeah, thank you. My question is with regards to the merging infant and junior schools becoming primaries and the fact that they get the 85% protection on the second effective lump sum. My question is, how long does that protection last for, and does it taper off over time?
Yes, Alison. Is it just the 1 year?
It's just the 1 year.
Protection?
Yeah, it's just the 1 year.
And then that's it. It's removed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay. No further questions. Then we move forward to, this is for school members, okay, of School Forum, that we endorse the proposed changes to the mainstream schools revenue funding arrangements as set out in section 5, endorse the school revenue funding pro forma at appendix 5 for submission to the ESFA on the 21st of January 2021. So this is for school members only. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Jason. And a seconder? Thank you, Sean. So the recommendation being proposed and seconded. I'll now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted. It says on my notes that the last bit has gone. As permitted within regulations. If there's no dissent, the proposal is passed. Okay, are there any objectors to these recommendations? Okay, therefore those recommendations have been approved. Okay, the next section is for all of Schools Forum members. So this is to recommend that the Schools Forum endorse the budget to be held centrally for the payment of central licences negotiated nationally for all schools by the Secretary of State. 2, approve the growth fund criteria for 2021-22 as set out in Appendix 3. 3, approve the budget to be held centrally, specifically Schools Forum, admissions and duties retained by the local authority for all schools. 4, endorse the Element 3 top-up values for special schools, alternative provision centres, inclusion centre and mainstream education, health and care plan banding for implementation in April 2021 as set out in Appendix 4. And 5, following the funding announcement from the Department of Education, endorse the proposed hourly rates to early years providers for 2021 as set out in Section 7 and Table 5. Do I have a proposer for approval of the recommendations, please?
Sorry, Dave. Number 4, the endorse the element 3 top-up values for special schools. I thought we just agreed that we would bring that back to Schools Forum on at the February meeting, so that needs to come out of the recommendations.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for noting that. I missed that. So do we have a thank you, Cara, for proposing? Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Chair. So the recommendation has been proposed and seconded. I will now take the vote by affirmation of the meeting as permitted within the regulations. If there is no dissent, the proposal is passed. Are there any objectors to this recommendation? Okay, thank you. So those recommendations have been approved. So that concludes today's meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, the 10th of February. Okay, so please add that to your diaries. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you have a good few weeks ahead of you. Thank you all.
Thanks, Dave.
It's still on.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's still on.
Do we know when we'll get the DSG proposal prior to next meeting?
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said, Jason.
Do you know how early we'll get the DSG proposal before the next meeting? Because it's obviously time critical, isn't it?
It is. The reports are due to be published on the week prior to the meeting, so they should be published. I think it is the 2nd of February.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. That's right. Okay. Thank you all then. Okay.
Right, thank you. Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Shall I turn the live stream off?
Yes, please do.
Yes, right. You'll still be audible for a couple of minutes though.